For hundreds of thousands of years, they dominated the European continent, flourishing in environments that would kill us within mere days. They hunted colossal creatures armed with nothing more than wooden spears and the raw power of their bodies. These weren't just another branch of humanity. They were, quite literally, freaks of nature, the Neanderthals. So if stories like this help you wind down, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment too with your location and time. I love seeing the mix. One night I had someone listening from Helsinki, while another tuned in from Houston. One was already in tomorrow, the other still in yesterday. Think you're strong. Compared to them, you're nothing. The average Neanderthal could crush your hand without the slightest effort. Their skeletons were thicker, their muscles denser, their strength beyond anything modern humans can truly grasp. For decades we pictured them as dull-witted cavemen, brutish throwbacks who could never match us in intelligence or adaptability. But that story was dead wrong. Recent discoveries have shattered the old image completely. Not only were Neanderthals physically superior to us in nearly every respect, but their brains were larger than ours. They crafted intricate tools, controlled fire, created art, and survived in extreme conditions that would devastate any modern population. They weren't just surviving. They were thriving in some of the harshest climates Earth has ever produced. So what made them such extraordinary physical specimens? And if they were so exceptional, why aren't they still here today? Why did they vanish while we went on to spread across the globe? The answers flip our understanding of human evolution upside down. The story of the Neanderthals begins roughly 400,000 years ago, when a group of ancient humans became isolated in Europe during a long, brutal ice age. Cut off from other populations in Africa, these humans began evolving traits perfectly suited to the freezing, punishing climate of Ice Age Europe. Their bodies didn't become stockier and stronger because they were primitive. They were evolving into survival machines. Look at a Neanderthal skeleton, and the first thing that hits you is sheer robustness. Their bones were markedly thicker and denser than ours. A Neanderthal femur, the thigh bone, could endure stresses that would snap a modern human's leg like kindling. Their arms and legs reveal massive muscle attachment points, clear evidence of incredibly powerful biceps, triceps, and forearms. But it wasn't just brute strength. Their entire body was shaped differently. They had barrel-like chests that were wider than ours, especially near the base of the rib cage. This expanded torso gave them larger lungs, and likely a more efficient cardiovascular system, critical for sustaining high energy activity in freezing climates. Their pelvises were wider too, lowering their center of gravity, which made them more stable and powerful. And then there's the skull. A Neanderthal skull shows a striking brow ridge above the eyes. Far from cosmetic, this heavy ridge supported their large face and shielded their eyes. Their noses were also much larger than ours, with wide nostrils and a pronounced bridge. This was no random quirk. It was an elegant adaptation to bitter cold. A bigger nose meant more internal surface area, allowing frigid air to be warmed and humidified before it reached the lungs, preventing the kind of cold damage that would cripple modern humans without technology. Their large sinuses reinforced this, helping further warm inhaled air. These weren't crude traits. They were brilliant evolutionary solutions that let Neanderthals thrive where most of us would perish. Even their jaws tell a story. Neanderthals lacked chins. Their jaws simply swept back from the teeth without the point we have. But what they missed in chin shape, they made up for in raw bite strength. Their jaws were thicker and more powerful, capable of generating immense force. The wear patterns on their teeth show they often used their mouths as tools, gripping animal skins or other materials while working. Their incisors, the front teeth, were especially large and worn in unique ways, suggesting they used them to clamp and pull animal hides. Something no modern human could do without destroying their teeth. All of this adds up to one conclusion: Neanderthals were physical powerhouses. But how strong were they really? Scientists have studied their muscle attachment sites to estimate strength, and the results are staggering. The average Neanderthal had upper body power about 1.5 times greater than the typical modern male. Some estimates suggest their arms were nearly twice as strong as even today's elite athletes. Their grip strength was off the charts. A modern man can usually manage around 80–120 pounds of grip force. A Neanderthal likely exceeded 200 pounds in each hand. They could crush things that we'd need tools to break. This wasn't just for show. Their immense strength was essential for survival. Unlike later humans, who invented projectile weapons that could kill from afar, Neanderthals relied on close quarters hunting. They designed heavy thrusting spears, not for throwing, but for driving straight into huge, dangerous prey at point-blank range. Just think about that. They were hunting animals like woolly rhinos, cave bears, and mammoths, beasts that could kill a human with ease. And Neanderthals took them on up close. This wasn't a failure of imagination. It was a deliberate strategy, perfectly tailored to their physical strengths. The evidence of this risky lifestyle is written in their bones. Neanderthal skeletons show injury patterns eerily similar to modern rodeo riders. Healed fractures litter their bodies, especially the head, neck, and upper torso, the kinds of injuries you'd expect from close encounters with giant, dangerous animals. One study found that about 80% of adult Neanderthals showed evidence of at least one major healed injury. One of the most famous cases is the Old Man of La Chapelle, Aux Saints, a Neanderthal who lived to around 40 years old, elderly by Paleolithic standards. His skeleton bears multiple healed injuries, broken ribs, a crushed toe, knee damage, even dental abscesses. Despite these hardships, he lived on for years, meaning his group must have cared for him during recovery. This was no gentle world. Neanderthals faced it head-on, with bodies built for resilience and strength. Their strength and hunting style were only part of what made the Neanderthals extraordinary. Their bodies were also meticulously tuned for survival in the cold, with adaptations that went far beyond oversized noses. Their proportions were different from ours in fundamental ways. Modern humans, shaped by Africa, evolved long limbs and slimmer builds, perfect for releasing heat in hot climates. Neanderthals, by contrast, had compact, muscular frames with shorter arms and legs, which conserved heat. Their physique resembled that of today's Inuit people, but pushed to the extreme. This was about more than comfort. It was survival. During the Ice Age, when temperatures plummeted, Neanderthal bodies could trap heat more efficiently, meaning they needed fewer layers of clothing, less firewood, and fewer calories to maintain warmth. That doesn't mean they didn't need food. In fact, they needed a lot. Their muscles, large brains, and cold environment demanded a caloric intake estimated between 3,500 and 5,000 calories a day, double what most sedentary people eat today, and on par with modern Olympic athletes. So where did all these calories come from? Mostly from meat. Chemical analysis of Neanderthal bones shows they were apex predators, taking most of their protein from large herbivores like deer, bison, wild horses, woolly rhinos, and mammoths. Many sites suggest they focused on reindeer, ambushing herds at predictable migration routes. But that doesn't mean they ignored plants. Recent studies of hardened dental plaque from their teeth have revealed evidence of grains, tubers, and even medicinal herbs. Still, their diet leaned heavily toward meat, especially in northern climates where plants were scarce. And it wasn't just the flesh of animals they ate. Fat, marrow, and organs, all nutrient-dense, were essential for survival in long, frigid winters. The way they obtained this food shows just how skilled they were as hunters. Across Europe, archaeologists have unearthed butchered remains of reindeer, horses, rhinos, and mammoths. The cut marks prove Neanderthals weren't scavengers. They were butchers who systematically broke down carcasses to extract every calorie-rich piece. At some French sites, evidence suggests mass hunts, entire herds of bison driven into natural traps, then slaughtered. On the island of Jersey, signs point to mammoths being forced off cliffs. This wasn't random luck. It required planning, an understanding of animal behavior, and cooperative strategies. And they didn't just go after weak or old prey. Many sites show they preferred prime-age animals, the healthiest and most dangerous targets, which provided the greatest nutritional return. Their weapons reflected this strategy. Wooden spears found at Schorningen in Germany, dated to about 300,000 years ago, prove they weren't crude clubs. These spears were finely crafted from spruce, with weight distributed toward the front like modern javelins. Tips were hardened with fire, able to pierce thick hides. Even more surprising evidence shows they sometimes used projectile weapons. Microscopic wear on stone points from France suggests they were hafted onto shafts and thrown, not just thrust. While not as advanced as later bows or atlals, this shows Neanderthals weren't limited to close-range combat. Perhaps most impressive was their use of adhesives. At multiple European sites, researchers found birch bark tar, a sticky resin created by carefully heating bark in low oxygen conditions. It's an incredibly complex process, requiring precise fire control to avoid burning the bark completely. Neanderthals used this tar to glue stone tips to shafts, creating composite weapons. This wasn't guesswork. Modern archaeologists trying to replicate the process with Stone Age tools often fail. The fact that Neanderthals routinely produced birch tar shows an advanced understanding of chemistry and technology. The physical strain of their lifestyle also shows up in their bones. Their arms were often asymmetrical, with the right side noticeably stronger, evidence of repeated spear, thrusting motions. This tells us their strength wasn't just genetic. It was built over a lifetime of grueling physical activity. But don't picture them as simply buff humans. Their physiology was different in ways that pushed the limits of survival. Their muscles likely had more fast twitch fibers for explosive bursts of strength. Their metabolisms ran hotter. Their cardiovascular systems were fine, tuned for power, and their bodies held heat far better than ours. These weren't primitive traits. They were specializations, the exact features needed to dominate Ice Age Europe. For more than 300,000 years, Neanderthals endured glacial winters and sudden climate swings, thriving in habitats from Mediterranean woodlands to the edge of the Arctic. And yet, strength and survival strategies were only part of the story. The real shocker came when scientists looked beyond their bodies to their brains. For decades, the belief was that Neanderthals were intellectually inferior, with heavy brows and long skulls that supposedly limited their mental capacity. But newer discoveries flipped that idea upside down. Their brains were bigger than ours. The average Neanderthal brain measured about 1/600 cubic centimeters, compared to 1/400 for modern humans. Some individuals had brains as large as 1/740 cubic centimeters, well beyond even our most gifted geniuses. Brain size isn't everything, of course. How it's wired matters. But endocasts, 3D models of Neanderthal brain cavities, show surprising complexity. While more of their brain was devoted to vision and movement control, they also had developed frontal lobes, the areas tied to planning, decision-making, and social behavior. The takeaway: Neanderthals weren't dumb brutes. Their minds were wired differently, but they were fully capable of intelligence, creativity, and social complexity. They also had sensory advantages. Their larger eye sockets hint at bigger eyes, ideal for seeing in low light, critical during long European winters. Their nasal cavities suggest heightened smell, useful for tracking prey. Even their ear bones hint they may have been tuned to different frequency ranges, potentially aiding in hunting or communication. All these traits together paint a picture not of simple cavemen, but of highly adapted humans, perfectly evolved to survive and excel in the frozen forests and plains of Ice Age Europe. The real shock about Neanderthals wasn't just their bodies or hunting prowess. It was their minds. For years, textbooks painted them as intellectually limited, strong, yes, but simple-minded compared to Homo sapiens. Bigger muscles, smaller thoughts. That story suited us, casting our species as the destined heirs of Earth. But recent evidence has torn that myth apart. Neanderthals weren't brainless cavemen. They were thinkers, inventors, and creators. Their technology, culture, and social lives prove they were far more like us than we once dared admit. Let's begin with their most surprising trait: bigger brains. The average Neanderthal brain measured around 1/600 cubic centimeters. Ours? About 1/400. Some individuals reached 1/700 cc, volumes far beyond even the largest modern human skulls. Now, brain size isn't the whole story. Wiring matters just as much. But detailed models of Neanderthal skull interiors reveal brains organized with unique emphasis. Their visual cortex, the brain's vision processing hub, was proportionally larger. That gave them heightened sight, especially valuable for spotting prey in the dim forests. and twilight of Ice Age Europe. They also had enlarged areas tied to body control and sensation, perfect for precision and strength in hunting. Yet their frontal lobes, responsible for planning, reasoning, and social interaction, were just as well developed as ours. Translation, their intelligence wasn't lesser. It was different, adapted to their world. Archaeological evidence supports this. Their behavior reveals foresight, technical mastery, and even symbolic thought. For over a century, Neanderthals were associated with the Mysterian tool tradition, stone flakes that many thought were crude and unchanging. But closer study shows this industry was anything but simple. They used the Levallois technique, a method requiring careful shaping of a stone core to produce flakes of predictable size and shape. This wasn't random hammering. It was deliberate craftsmanship, involving planning, visualization, and practiced skill. Even modern archaeologists need years to replicate their precision, and they didn't stop at stone. At sites across Europe, evidence shows they created composite tools, stone tips attached to wooden shafts with adhesives. Their birch bark tar, produced through controlled heating in oxygen-restricted conditions, is one of the earliest known synthetic materials on Earth. Making it required advanced fire control and chemical knowledge, once thought exclusive to modern humans. They mastered fire for more than tar. Hearths found in caves suggest planned layouts, some areas for tool making, others for cooking, others perhaps for sleeping. They cooked food, hardened wood, and lit dark caves. Fire was central to their daily lives, not a rare luxury. They also worked bone. At French sites, researchers uncovered lissoirs, bone tools used to soften hides. These artifacts predate the arrival of modern humans in Europe, showing Neanderthals independently invented specialized tools. In 2020, archaeologists even found a fragment of twisted cord made from plant fibers, the oldest evidence of string making in history. Creating rope demands abstract thinking, understanding how separate strands combine into stronger cords, a knowledge base essential for nets, traps, and carrying devices. Their hunting strategies prove similar sophistication. Rather than chasing any animal, they strategically targeted prime age adults, the riskiest but most rewarding prey. They set ambushes in migration bottlenecks, worked in coordinated groups, and sometimes drove herds toward cliffs or swamps. These weren't reckless attacks, but calculated operations, requiring planning and cooperation. Even their plant use shows knowledge and tradition. At Shanadar Cave in Iraq, pollen remains around a Neanderthal skeleton, once suggested flowers placed at burial, though debated. It highlights their interaction with plants. More solid evidence comes from hardened dental plaque, which preserves microscopic plant particles. Studies reveal they consumed grains, legumes, and even medicinal herbs with pain, relieving or antibiotic properties. This wasn't trial and error survival. It was cultural knowledge passed down through generations. And then there's art. For decades, symbolic behavior was thought unique to Homo sapiens, but Neanderthals left behind pigments, decorated shells, and cave paintings, some older than the arrival of our species in Europe. At Cueva de los Ovaones in Spain, pierced shells stained with pigments were likely worn as ornaments over 115,000 years ago. At La Pasiga Cave, red symbols dated to 64,000 years ago appear long before modern humans arrived. At Bruniquel Cave in France, deep underground, Neanderthals arranged stalagmites into circular structures 176,000 years ago. No practical use has ever been found, suggesting ritual or symbolic meaning. These discoveries force us to abandon the idea of Neanderthals as dull beasts. They weren't just surviving, they were expressing, creating, and perhaps even believing. Their capacity for compassion also stands out. Many Neanderthal skeletons show healed injuries that would have left individuals crippled. Yet they lived on, evidence of care from their peers. The old man of La Chapelle, toothless and arthritic, would have needed help to eat and move. His survival proves his group valued him, even when he could no longer hunt. And there were burials. At multiple sites, bodies were deliberately placed in pits or depressions, sometimes with grave goods. At Shanadar Cave, at least 9 Neanderthal burials have been documented. At La Chapelle, Ox Saints, careful excavation revealed an intentionally dug grave. Burial implies abstract thought, concern for the dead, perhaps even belief in an afterlife. Put simply, Neanderthals had culture. They cared. They created. They planned. They weren't lesser humans. They were a different kind of human, one whose intelligence took a different shape but reached just as far. If Neanderthals were so powerful, so well adapted, and so cognitively advanced, why did they disappear while our ancestors endured? The answer isn't straightforward. Scientists still debate it, but the likely truth lies in a mix of challenges: climate, competition, disease, and demographics. Around 40,000 years ago, Europe experienced sudden and extreme climate swings known as Heinrich events. These rapid freezes disrupted ecosystems, shrinking populations of the large game Neanderthals relied on. Their meat-heavy diet became harder to sustain. Then came us, Homo sapiens. Modern humans began arriving in Europe about 45,000 years ago, armed with different tools, new hunting strategies, and possibly more flexible social structures. Evidence doesn't suggest large-scale warfare between us and them. There are no mass graves filled with Neanderthal skeletons bearing weapon wounds. But competition, even peaceful competition, could have drained their numbers. Disease may have been another blow. Migrants from Africa likely carried pathogens that Neanderthals had never encountered. With no immunity, even a single outbreak could devastate their small communities. Yet they didn't vanish completely. Genetic evidence shows that most non-African humans alive today carry between 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. Our ancestors didn't just compete with them, they interbred. This means their disappearance wasn't total replacement, but gradual absorption. As their populations dwindled under environmental and competitive stress, more and more Neanderthals joined Homo sapiens groups, their genes mixing into ours. So their story isn't one of total failure, it's one of transformation. For hundreds of thousands of years they thrived. Stronger, tougher, and just as clever as us, they dominated Europe in ways we can barely imagine. Their legacy lives on inside us, in our bones, our skin, even our immune systems. They weren't evolutionary dead ends. They were a successful branch of humanity that endured far longer than our own species has so far. Their story reminds us that there's no single way to be human. Their bones reveal strength beyond ours. Their culture shows creativity, and their genes still shape us. They were survival machines built for Ice Age Europe, and yet their fate shows how fragile even the strongest adaptations can be. Because Neanderthals were more than just brute force. Their extraordinary nature extended to their minds, technologies, and societies. Imagine standing on a frozen steppe in what's now southern France, 40,000 years ago. The temperature hovers around -20 degrees Celsius. The wind bites like knives. The horizon stretches wide and treeless, broken only by rocky outcrops. No shelters, no power lines, no safety nets, just wilderness. Without fireproof jackets, insulated boots, or modern gear, how long would you last? A few hours? Maybe a couple of days? This was the Neanderthal world, not for a weekend camping trip, but for their entire lives. They didn't just endure. They flourished. They hunted, raised families, made art, and passed down traditions. They lived whole lives in environments that would kill us quickly. How? Because their survival rested not only on their physiology, but on their social structures, knowledge, and technologies. Their living spaces reveal surprising sophistication. While we often imagine them only as cave people, evidence shows they structured their dwellings carefully. In caves, hearths were strategically placed for light, warmth, and cooking. At Abric, Romany in Spain, wooden platforms raised them off the cold ground, a kind of prehistoric bed frame, and they weren't limited to caves. At sites like Moldova in Ukraine, Neanderthals built shelters from mammoth bones, draped with hides. These weren't flimsy shacks. They were maintained over time, proving long-term planning. They stockpiled firewood, organized living areas, and created shelters that supported them through brutal winters. Their hunting also showed foresight. Studies of animal remains reveal that Neanderthals targeted specific prey, depending on the season: reindeer in autumn, ibex in summer, bison in winter. They knew migration routes and exploited them. They also transported only the richest cuts of meat back to their shelters, conserving energy. That kind of decision-making shows calculation, not instinct. At some sites, evidence points to communal hunts, whole groups working together to drive herds toward cliffs or natural traps. This required roles, planning, and coordination. And their social lives were built on cooperation. We've already seen how they cared for the injured and elderly, keeping them alive long after they ceased being productive hunters. Group sizes were likely small, 10 to 20 people, often extended families. Yet they weren't isolated. Stone from distant quarries shows trade and contact with other groups, sometimes spanning 50 kilometers or more. There are even hints of cultural diversity between different Neanderthal groups, variations in tools, hunting strategies, and symbolic practices. These weren't instinctive behaviors shared by all, but traditions passed down within communities. That's culture, and it didn't stop with stone tools. They made composite weapons with adhesives, cordage from plant fibers, and bone implements for working hides. These weren't casual improvisations. They were technologies requiring precision, knowledge, and teaching. Their fire use also shows this. They weren't just waiting for lightning. They controlled fire deliberately, using it for cooking, warmth, light, and tool making. Some structures deep within caves could only have been built with torches, proving they could carry and maintain flames in total darkness. All of this paints a picture of Neanderthals, not as grunting brutes, but as intelligent, resourceful, culturally rich humans. Neanderthals weren't only clever toolmakers. They were also masters of survival through social bonds, knowledge, sharing, and cultural traditions. Their lives show us that intelligence doesn't just live in the individual mind, but in the group. Their shelters demonstrate this clearly. While caves often provided protection, they didn't just squat in them. They structured living areas with forethought. Hearths were positioned for warmth and light. Sleeping platforms raised them off damp floors. At sites like Abric Romani in Spain, layers of ash and wood remain, traces of deliberate planning. And when caves weren't available, they built their own dwellings. At Moldova in Ukraine, mammoth bones were used as frames for shelters, likely covered with hides. These were strong, durable, and reused over time. That means foresight, not a temporary camp, but a living space meant to endure. This foresight extended to how they hunted. They weren't reckless chasers. They studied herds and struck at the right moment. Animal remains show seasonal choices. Reindeer in autumn migration, ibex in summer when they moved down from mountains, bison in winter valleys. This was detailed ecological knowledge. Even what they carried back shows calculation. They didn't haul entire carcasses. They brought the best parts, nutrient, rich meat and fat, saving energy for what mattered most. At some sites, the evidence is even more striking. In Jersey, dozens of mammoths and rhinos were found at the base of a cliff. The likely explanation? Coordinated hunts where groups drove herds to their deaths. That requires planning, communication, and roles within a team. This kind of cooperation is reflected in their social lives. Group sizes were small, usually 10 to 20 individuals, often extended families. But they weren't cut off. Traces of stone and materials from quarries dozens of kilometers away show they interacted with other groups. That means trade, exchange, or shared territories. Within these groups, there may have been division of labor. Some skeletons show patterns of repeated stress from specific tasks, suggesting certain individuals specialized, hunters, hide workers, or tool makers. Specialization increases efficiency, but requires trust and interdependence, and evidence points to cultural diversity among groups. Different regions show unique tool styles, hunting strategies, and possibly symbolic behaviors. That's tradition, knowledge passed down, taught, and remembered. Consider their adhesives. Birch bark tar wasn't just discovered once. It was recreated across Europe for tens of thousands of years. That means teaching, apprenticeship, and memory. Knowledge outlived individuals, the mark of true culture. Even their cord making, proven by the twisted fiber fragment found in France, suggests generations of skill. Fiber must be stripped, twisted, and braided in patterns that create strength. Such techniques aren't reinvented each time. They're learned. Their fire use shows the same. Neanderthals didn't stumble into fire occasionally. They made it, maintained it, and placed it strategically. Some structures deep inside caves could only exist because they carried light with them. Torches they kept alive in total darkness, and they didn't just use fire for cooking or warmth. They used it for tool making, chemistry, and likely social or ritual purposes. Fire was woven into daily and cultural life. All of this reveals a truth: Neanderthal intelligence wasn't just about strong brains. It was about shared minds, groups teaching, learning, and passing down traditions. Their knowledge extended to plants as well. Dental plaque has revealed microscopic traces of herbs with medicinal properties. At El Sidrun cave in Spain, one Neanderthal with a tooth abscess appears to have eaten pain-relieving plants, a kind of ancient medicine. That shows not only recognition of edible vs. poisonous plants, but specific uses for healing. These weren't instincts. This was ethnobotany, cultural knowledge preserved and taught. And then there's the most controversial subject: their art and symbols. For years, scientists denied Neanderthals the ability to think symbolically. But pigments, ornaments, and paintings prove otherwise. In Spain, shells pierced and stained with ochre pigments date to more than 115,000 years ago. They were ornaments, decorations for the body, carrying meaning beyond survival. In caves like La Pasiga, Maltreviso, and Ardales, red handprints and geometric shapes date back at least 64,000 years, long before modern humans entered Europe. That means Neanderthals themselves made them. At Bruniquel Cave in France, broken stalagmites arranged into circular structures 176,000 years ago remain one of the most baffling finds. Deep in the dark, far from daylight, they carried fire to create formations with no practical purpose. Ritual? Symbolic meaning? We may never know, but it was not the work of simple brutes. Symbolic thought changes everything. It means they could assign meaning to objects and actions beyond utility. And if they could do that, they may have had language. Direct proof of language is elusive. It doesn't fossilize. But evidence points in its favor. Their vocal tract could have produced a wide range of sounds. The hyoid bone from a Neanderthal in Israel is nearly identical to ours. Their genomes contain the FEXP2 gene, critical for speech and language in modern humans. And beyond biology, their behaviors demand language. Coordinated hunts, birch tar production, complex tool making, teaching younger generations. None of these are possible without structured communication. If Neanderthals had language, it might have been rich in words for animals, weather, and landscapes. It probably carried social language too, for emotions, kinship, and identity. Together, their shelters, tools, fire, art, and likely speech prove Neanderthals weren't half humans. They were fully human in a different form, intelligent, cultural, and capable. So, if Neanderthals were intelligent, resilient, and socially complex, why did they vanish while our species endured? The truth is layered, involving climate, population dynamics, and competition. Not a single dramatic event. One crucial factor was their numbers. Genetic studies show Neanderthals lived in relatively small, isolated groups. Their gene pool was shallow, leaving them vulnerable to inbreeding and reduced fitness. Modern humans, by contrast, maintained larger, more interconnected populations that could bounce back from setbacks. Climate didn't help. Between 40,000 and 30,000 years ago, Europe endured violent climate shifts, sudden freezes followed by short warm spells. These swings destabilized ecosystems, reducing populations of large prey. For a species so dependent on high-calorie meat, these losses were devastating. Meanwhile, early modern humans had more varied diets. Archaeological evidence shows they ate fish, birds, and small game in addition to large animals. They tapped into rivers and coasts, expanding their food sources beyond what Neanderthals typically pursued. That flexibility may have given them the edge. Disease may also have played a role. Humans migrating from Africa likely carried unfamiliar pathogens. For Neanderthals, with no immunity, exposure could have been catastrophic, thinning their already small populations. Still, the story isn't simple extinction. Genetics proves Neanderthals and Homo sapiens interbred. Most people of Eurasian ancestry carry 4% Neanderthal DNA. That means they didn't disappear entirely. They became part of us. But the genetic legacy isn't uniform. Some Neanderthal traits persisted because they helped us adapt. Variants linked to skin tone, hair type, fat metabolism, and immune responses offered advantages in colder, pathogen-rich environments. Other genes, particularly those on the X chromosome and ones affecting male fertility, were weeded out, likely because they reduced hybrid fitness. In some cases, Neanderthal DNA even influences modern health. Certain variants are associated with depression, mood regulation, and immune system responses. Others linked to diseases like Crohn's, type 2 diabetes, or susceptibility to viruses. What helped them survive in the Ice Age can complicate our lives today. So, Neanderthals didn't just fade away. They live on, in our genomes and perhaps in some of our behaviors. This realization forces us to rethink human evolution. It wasn't a straight ladder leading to us as the pinnacle. It was a branching tree, with multiple human species coexisting, sometimes competing, sometimes mingling. Neanderthals weren't failed humans. They were successful for hundreds of thousands of years, far longer than our species has existed so far. For many decades, popular culture mocked them as grunting cavemen. But the evidence shows they were anything but primitive. They were intelligent, cultural, and strong. Another valid way of being human. Picture them again on the European plains broad. Powerful bodies, skilled hands, clever minds. For generations upon generations, they thrived where we might last only days. Their disappearance wasn't inevitable. It was chance, circumstance, and competition. And their story reminds us of something important. Evolution doesn't guarantee survival for the strongest, or even the smartest. It favors those most adaptable to change. Modern humans happen to adapt in ways that worked when climates shifted and ecosystems collapsed. Neanderthals, specialized for their world, were less flexible. But that doesn't make them inferior. It makes them different. Because for hundreds of millennia, they were humanity in Europe. They lived, loved, fought, dreamed, and raised families. Their DNA is proof that they are still with us, not just in the ground, but in our blood. They weren't freaks in the dismissive sense. They were extraordinary. Robust bodies, sharp minds, and complex cultures made them one of the most remarkable human species to ever walk the earth. And their legacy is clear. There are many ways to be human. Neanderthals show us one path, not failed, not lesser, but distinct. The encounter between Neanderthals and early modern humans has long been told as a simple story. Superior Homo sapiens arrived, outsmarted their primitive cousins, and took over. But the evidence tells a much richer tale, one of interaction, interbreeding, and cultural overlap. To understand it, we need to step back. While Neanderthals were adapting to Ice Age Europe, Homo sapiens were evolving in Africa around 300,000 years ago. There, our ancestors developed slimmer, taller bodies with longer limbs, physiques suited for releasing heat in warm climates. Instead of raw power, they excelled in endurance, persistence hunting, where prey collapses after being chased for miles, was their specialty. Their weapons reflected this. Where Neanderthals built heavy thrusting spears for close combat, early humans crafted lighter projectiles, spears that could be thrown at a distance, and eventually at lulls that extended their reach even further. This meant less risk, more safety. By 70,000 years ago, groups of Homo sapiens began leaving Africa. They spread into the Middle East, then Asia, reaching Australia by 65,000 years ago. When they entered Europe around 45,000 years ago, Neanderthals were already there, seasoned survivors of its brutal landscapes. For decades, the timeline seemed neat. Humans arrived, Neanderthals vanished, replacement pure and simple. But genetic discoveries blew that view apart. In 2010, researchers sequenced the Neanderthal genome. The shock was immediate. Most people of Eurasian descent carry 14% Neanderthal DNA. That meant the two species didn't just fight, they mated. Multiple times. Likely between 45,000 and 55,000 years ago, mostly in the Middle East, though possibly in Europe too. This was no isolated fluke. The genetic imprint was strong enough to survive tens of thousands of years, which means Neanderthals didn't die out. In a strict sense, they became part of us. But the genetic legacy is selective. Some traits helped and stuck around, genes for skin, hair, fat metabolism, and immune defenses. Others vanished, especially those that hurt fertility or brain development. Hybrid children may have sometimes struggled, but enough survived to pass their DNA forward. And the story isn't just in genes. Archaeology shows cultural overlap too. In parts of France and Spain, tool industries appear that blend elements of Neanderthal and modern human traditions. The Châtelperronian culture, for example, combines Mousterian-style stone tools with blade techniques and bone tools more typical of early humans. For years, scholars argued about who created them. The clincher came when Neanderthal remains were found with Telperonian artifacts. That meant Neanderthals themselves were making these hybrid tools. Whether they learned from us, taught us, or invented them independently, the result was the same cultural exchange, not simple replacement. And cultural contact may have gone further. Did humans adopt Neanderthal hunting tricks? Did Neanderthals borrow human ornament styles? Archaeology doesn't give a final answer, but the overlaps suggest both influence and innovation. It wasn't a clash of primitive vs advanced. It was two intelligent human species encountering one another after hundreds of thousands of years apart. So why did Homo sapiens ultimately expand while Neanderthals dwindled? Demographics matter. Our groups were larger, more interconnected, and more diverse genetically. Neanderthal bands were smaller, more isolated. In times of stress, climate swings, disease outbreaks, or prey shortages, that difference became critical. Flexibility also mattered. Humans ate fish, birds, and small game alongside big prey. Neanderthals specialized in large herbivores. When herds thinned, humans could pivot. Neanderthals had fewer options. But competition wasn't the end of the story. Assimilation played a huge role. As Neanderthal numbers shrank, more of them likely joined human groups. Over time, their distinct features blurred into ours. The last Neanderthals persisted in refuges like Gibraltar until around 37,000 years ago. Then, as separate populations, they were gone. But in another sense, they remain in our blood, our biology, and perhaps in pieces of our culture. This makes the story of our encounter far more nuanced than the old replacement myth. We weren't simply better, we were different. Our advantages in numbers, networks, and adaptability gave us resilience. Their specializations made them less flexible in rapidly shifting conditions. But they weren't lesser beings. They were humans, just another kind. The story of the Neanderthals challenges how we think about evolution itself. For too long, we pictured human history as a ladder. Primitive forms at the bottom, us at the top, each rung an improvement. But the truth looks more like a branching tree, with multiple species coexisting, sometimes crossing paths, sometimes interbreeding, and sometimes disappearing. Neanderthals weren't failed versions of us. They were a distinct branch, perfectly adapted to their world. For hundreds of thousands of years, they thrived in conditions harsher than most humans today could withstand. Their disappearance was not destiny, but circumstance. Other human species existed alongside us too. Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbits of Indonesia. Homo luzonensis in the Philippines. Denisovans, known mostly from DNA rather than bones, but genetically close to both Neanderthals and us. Each was another path evolution could take. For most of history, multiple kinds of humans shared the planet. That perspective forces humility. We aren't the inevitable winners of a straight evolutionary race. We're the survivors of a much more complex process, one where chance and adaptation mattered as much as strength or intelligence. The Neanderthal disappearance varied by region. In some places, like Gibraltar, they lasted until around 40,000 years ago. In others, they vanished earlier. This wasn't a sudden wipeout, but a gradual contraction, shaped by climate swings, competition, and shrinking populations. And even as they faded, they influenced us. Genetic studies reveal that many Neanderthal traits persist. Some helped us adapt to colder climates. Genes affecting skin and hair color, fat metabolism, and immunity were inherited from them. Others were disadvantageous and disappeared over time. Fertility issues, or neural differences that didn't fit with our biology. But interbreeding wasn't just biology. It was social. For their DNA to live on, Neanderthals had to be close enough to form families with modern humans. That means cooperation, relationships, and shared lives. Archaeology hints at cultural blending too. In tool industries, ornaments, and perhaps even symbolic practices, elements overlap. Humans entering Europe may have learned from Neanderthal knowledge of local landscapes and prey. Neanderthals may have adopted aspects of human technology or art. This wasn't a simple replacement. It was an encounter between two kinds of humans, each intelligent, each successful, each with something to offer. Modern humans may have had broader social networks, allowing innovations to spread more quickly. That could explain why certain technologies, like projectile weapons or symbolic art, became more widespread after our arrival. But Neanderthals weren't incapable of these things. They had their own versions, and sometimes they may have independently invented similar ideas. Ultimately, what tipped the balance was likely demographics and flexibility. Our groups were larger, more connected, and more adaptable to different diets and environments. Theirs were smaller, more isolated, and more specialized, in a time of rapid climate upheaval. Those differences proved decisive. Still, their disappearance doesn't diminish their achievements. They survived for over 300,000 years, far longer than Homo sapiens has so far. They mastered fire, crafted tools, built shelters, created art, and cared for their sick and elderly. They weren't evolutionary losers. They were extraordinary survivors. And they remind us of an important truth. There isn't one way to be human. Their story shows us a different expression of humanity, one that valued strength, resilience, and close, knit communities. Our story favored adaptability, endurance, and large social networks. Both worked. Both were valid. Their legacy continues not only in our genes, but in our understanding of ourselves. Every discovery, a new tool, a painted cave wall, a burial site, forces us to rethink what it means to be human. Neanderthals weren't just strong. They were sophisticated. They weren't just survivors. They were innovators. They weren't erased. They became part of us. Their chapter in human history isn't a footnote. It's a parallel story, running alongside ours, rich and complex. The Neanderthal story didn't end with their disappearance. In many ways, it continues in us. Their genes still shape our biology. Their discoveries reshape our understanding. And their legacy forces us to rethink what it means to be human. When scientists first mapped the Neanderthal genome in 2010, the revelation was staggering. Most people of Eurasian descent carry between 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. That meant our ancestors didn't simply replace them, they mixed with them. We are, in part, Neanderthal, but not all of their DNA survived equally. Some variants gave us advantages and were kept by natural selection. Others caused problems and were gradually lost. Beneficial Neanderthal genes are linked to skin and hair traits that helped humans adapt to northern latitudes with weak sunlight. Others involve fat storage and metabolism, crucial for surviving in cold climates. Still others boosted immune responses, protecting us against pathogens in Eurasia. But not every gene was helpful. Some Neanderthal variants are associated with higher risk of depression, Crohn's disease, diabetes, and even severe responses to viruses. What was once adaptive in the Ice Age can complicate health in the modern world. Their DNA also left patterns that reveal history. East Asian populations carry slightly more Neanderthal ancestry than Europeans, suggesting multiple interbreeding events as humans spread across Eurasia. Sub-Saharan Africans, whose ancestors didn't leave Africa, carry little to none. The genetics align perfectly with what migration patterns tell us. Beyond genes, their very existence reshaped how we think about humanity. For decades, we believed humans stood apart from animals, defined by intelligence, culture, and technology. Neanderthals challenged that. They too controlled fire, made tools, created art, and buried their dead. They weren't less human. They were another kind of human. Their disappearance wasn't because they were inferior. It was the result of climate change, small populations, and historical accident. Had things played out differently, we might share the planet with them today. Imagine that modern cities with Neanderthal neighborhoods. Two species of humanity living side by side. It's not impossible, it's just not the way history turned. Their story also teaches us humility. For centuries, Western science portrayed human evolution as a straight march toward perfection. From ape, like ancestors to us, as the pinnacle. That story flattered us, but it wasn't true. Neanderthals prove evolution isn't progress, it's adaptation. They thrived sustainably for hundreds of thousands of years, living in balance with their environments. Their technologies, though sophisticated, were built on renewable resources and left little permanent impact. Contrast that with us. In just a few centuries, we've altered ecosystems on a global scale. Neanderthals remind us that survival doesn't require overwhelming the planet. Their fate also warns us. For all their strength and intelligence, they were still vulnerable to sudden climate shifts, shrinking prey populations, and new diseases. They were dominant for ages, and then gone in a geological blink. Their story shows that no species, no matter how successful, is guaranteed permanence. And yet, their story is also inspiring. The fact that they survived in such brutal conditions for so long proves the resilience of humanity in all its forms. They teach us that intelligence and culture aren't limited to us alone, that multiple ways of being human have existed and could exist again. New discoveries continue to deepen the story. Advances in DNA analysis reveal more about their biology. Archaeology uncovers more about their tools, their art, and their daily lives. The more we learn, the more complex and human they become. The crude caveman stereotype is gone. In its place is a portrait of beings who were strong, smart, creative, and compassionate. So when we look in the mirror, we're not just seeing Homo sapiens. For many of us, a small part of that reflection is Neanderthal. Their genes live in our skin, our immune systems, our moods. Their story lives in the caves, the bones, the pigments, and the fire pits they left behind. And together, they remind us of something profound: humanity has never been just one thing. Throughout our exploration of Neanderthals, one truth becomes clear: they weren't a failed experiment. They were extraordinary beings, strong, intelligent, and deeply human in their own way. Their physical power was unmatched. Their cultural and technological skills were remarkable. Their social lives revealed empathy and cooperation. And their genes live on within us, shaping our biology to this day. But their greatest lesson may be what they reveal about human diversity. For most of history, multiple species of humans shared the Earth. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo sapiens, and others. Sometimes they competed, sometimes they mingled, sometimes they merged. Humanity wasn't one straight line, but a web of branches. That makes our survival as the only human species today feel unusual, maybe even temporary. The past reminds us that our dominance isn't guaranteed forever. Their story also expands our definition of humanity. For centuries, we told ourselves that what makes us human is unique: our brains, our creativity, our culture. But Neanderthals proved those traits were shared. They too painted caves, wore ornaments, cared for the weak, and buried their dead. They challenged the old idea that we alone hold intelligence or meaning. Instead, they show that humanity is broader, that there are many ways to be human, and their disappearance is a reminder of fragility. For hundreds of thousands of years, they thrived. Then, within a few thousand years of climate upheavals and competition, they were gone. If it can happen to them, it can happen to us. At the same time, their endurance inspires us. They lived sustainably, generation after generation, without exhausting their environments. They maintained balance far longer than our industrial civilization has. Their story asks us whether we can learn from them, about resilience, adaptation, and limits. As technology advances, our understanding of Neanderthals keeps growing. New DNA techniques extract genetic material from bones over 100,000 years old. Microscopic analysis of dental plaque reveals their diets, even their medicines. Cave excavations uncover structures built in complete darkness. Every discovery chips away at the stereotype of brutish cavemen and reveals complex humans instead. Popular culture is slowly catching up. Museums, documentaries, and books now portray Neanderthals not as grunting primitives, but as intelligent, resourceful people. Fiction reimagines them with respect, not mockery. They are finally being restored to their rightful place in the human story. And that story is not just about the past. It's about us. Their DNA shapes our health. Their survival strategies hold lessons for a changing climate. Their art and symbols broaden our understanding of creativity. Their compassion expands our definition of humanity. They were freaks of nature, but not in a dismissive sense. Freaks because they were extraordinary. Freaks because they thrived where others could not. Freaks because their existence forces us to rethink what we thought it meant to be human. In the end, their story is both warning and hope, a warning that no species lasts forever, and hope that humanity, in all its forms, is more resilient and diverse than we often admit. So, the next time you look at your hands, your skin, or your reflection, remember, part of what you see may come from them. They are not just fossils in caves or bones in museums. They are inside us, in our bodies, our stories, and our understanding of who we are. The Neanderthals deserve not to be dismissed, but remembered with respect. For they were not failures. They were another way of being human, extraordinary, enduring, and remarkable. As we close this journey into the world of Neanderthals, what stands out most is how much they reshape our view of humanity. They weren't shadows of us, waiting to be replaced. They were their own people. Powerful, creative, resilient, who walked the earth alongside our ancestors for millennia. Their bones show unmatched strength. Their tools and adhesives reveal ingenuity. Their art and ornaments prove imagination. Their burials show compassion. And their genes, still alive in us, prove that their legacy never truly ended. For a long time, the caricature of Neanderthals as hunched brutes dominated culture. Museums displayed them as ape-like, films mocked them as stupid, and textbooks portrayed them as failures. But discovery after discovery has overturned that view. The truth is richer, stranger, and far more human. They were survival machines, but also thinkers. They were close, combat hunters, but also planners. They were strong beyond belief, but also gentle enough to care for the sick and bury their dead. And while they eventually disappeared as a distinct population, their story didn't end in extinction. It continued in us. Every person outside Africa carries traces of their DNA. Their strength, their endurance, even fragments of their vulnerabilities live on inside modern humans. That changes how we think about identity. We are not purely Homo sapiens. We are hybrids, shaped by encounters with other humans who once shared our planet. It also changes how we think about the future. If another human species could exist until just 40,000 years ago, what does that say about our uniqueness today? If they survived that long, why not longer? What if things had turned out differently? If climate, chance, and competition hadn't cut their numbers, could they have thrived alongside us into the present? We can only imagine what that world might have looked like: cities, shared between two species, cultures intertwining, perhaps two kinds of humanity learning and growing together. It didn't happen, but the possibility reminds us of how contingent history really is. And as science continues to advance, the Neanderthal story grows deeper. Ancient DNA analysis now reveals not only who they were, but who else existed with them: Denisovans, and perhaps others still undiscovered. Archaeology keeps uncovering more of their culture: pigments, ornaments, structures in caves, even signs of medicinal plant use. Each find makes them more human in our eyes. The lesson is profound. We are not the sole measure of humanity. We are one version among many possibilities. Neanderthals show us that intelligence, culture, and compassion are not uniquely ours. They were shared across species. Their disappearance, too, is a lesson. They thrived for 300,000 years, longer than our species has so far. Yet in a short span of environmental upheaval and competition, they were gone. No matter how strong, no matter how clever, survival is never guaranteed. That reality should humble us. Our technologies and global reach feel permanent, but Neanderthals remind us that even the most successful humans can vanish when conditions shift too quickly. But their endurance should inspire us. They adapted, endured, and flourished in environments where we would struggle to last a day. They show us the resilience of humanity in all its forms. So perhaps the greatest gift Neanderthals left us isn't just their DNA. It's perspective. They remind us that humanity is larger than Homo sapiens alone. That survival is fragile, but creativity and adaptation are powerful. That there are many ways to be human. They were freaks of nature, yes, but freaks because they were extraordinary, because they stood out in the human story as beings of strength, complexity, and endurance. Their tale is not a footnote, it is a full chapter, one that still unfolds as new evidence emerges, one that continues to shape how we see ourselves. And when we look inward, at our blood, our bones, our imagination, we find that their story is also ours. The Neanderthals' legacy is more than fossils and fragments. It's a mirror, reflecting both who they were and who we are. For centuries, they were written off as primitive, dismissed as evolutionary mistakes. But the evidence tells a different story. They weren't failures. They were extraordinary humans, thriving in the harshest climates on Earth for hundreds of millennia. Their DNA lives in us. Their tools and art redefine intelligence. Their compassion shows that care and empathy are ancient human values. not modern inventions, and their disappearance reminds us of fragility. They dominated Europe for ages, and then, gone in a blink. It wasn't because they were less intelligent or less worthy. It was circumstance, climate chaos, shrinking populations, competition, and chance. That perspective forces humility. We like to think our species is permanent, inevitable. But the Neanderthal story proves otherwise. No species, no matter how powerful, is guaranteed survival. Yet their endurance is also hope. For hundreds of thousands of years, they sustained themselves without destroying ecosystems, without overwhelming the planet. They adapted, generation after generation, balancing strength with knowledge. In that, they may have been wiser than us. New discoveries keep reminding us just how much more there is to learn. DNA extraction, microscopic residue analysis, advanced dating methods. Each breakthrough adds more depth to their world. We may one day reconstruct their diets in detail, their medicines, even aspects of their senses, what they saw, smelled, and heard. Every new piece of data erases a little more of the caveman myth. And as the picture grows richer, so too does our understanding of humanity. Neanderthals weren't other. They were us. Different, yes, but undeniably human. Their survival strategies, their innovations, their art and compassion, all these show that the roots of humanity run deeper and wider than we once thought. Their story also matters for the future. If another species of human lived beside us until just 40,000 years ago, then intelligence and culture are not unique to us alone. That changes how we think about our place in nature. It shapes how we might one day view artificial intelligence, or even life beyond Earth. The Neanderthal experience reminds us that complexity, creativity, and humanity itself can take many forms, and their sustainability stands as a lesson. They survived for longer than Homo sapiens has existed so far, all without the ecological devastation we've unleashed in mere centuries. Their balance with the natural world challenges us to imagine progress differently, not as endless growth, but as endurance. The Neanderthal's story is, in the end, both cautionary and inspiring. A caution that even the strongest can fall when the world shifts too quickly, and an inspiration that humanity, in all its forms, is remarkably resilient, adaptable, and creative. When you look in the mirror, part of what you see is them. The curve of your nose, the color of your skin, the way your immune system fights disease. Traces of Neanderthal ancestry live within you. Their legacy isn't buried in caves. It walks in every one of us. They were freaks of nature, not as monsters, but as marvels, beings of strength and intelligence, whose existence expands our definition of humanity. Their tale deserves to be told not as a side note in human evolution, but as a full chapter. A chapter that reveals just how diverse, resilient, and extraordinary the human story truly is. And as long as we continue to learn from them, their endurance, their fragility, their adaptability, the Neanderthals will never truly be gone.